Item 10 on your original agenda but been changed around. This is Reducing Traffic, Auckland's VKT Reduction Program. And we're here to receive an overview of the findings of this document here. Make sure it doesn't fall on you. You do yourself a very serious injury. There is about 700 odd pages, and we'll have a test on this at the end of the meeting. Okay. All humour aside, we've got Tim and Hamish to present to us today, so over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa, thanks for having us. As mentioned, this will just be a brief overview, and Chair, I'd like to essentially take the slides as read and just draw out the highlights of the slide deck so we're not going through reading every point individually, which leaves us time for questions as there is quite a considerable technical document associated with this program. Yeah, cool. So what I'd like to keep in mind is the value of bringing this program before the committee at this time, which is essentially that it helps us to evaluate the potential of large-scale projects in the region. This gives us a measuring stick against which to compare. This is a program of mass action, low cost, fast delivery of things across the region as opposed to individual large-scale projects and what we could potentially deliver with that. It helps us understand what our climate commitments might look like. There's a level of detail much greater than what was in the TERP here in terms of what it would cost and what it might need to be delivered in order to achieve emissions reduction for the transport system. And the information contained within the technical report can help us develop future transport projects and strategies. The three key components that came out of the work were that we need to focus on transport, land use, and communication and leadership all together if we want to achieve something at the scale and sort of pace that's described in our emissions reduction objectives. And the key component and the key driver of this was that we got to a 29% reduction in light vehicle travel in the region, which was a target set under the government's emissions reduction plan. So Auckland faces multiple challenges, which we're all reasonably aware with. There are funding problems. There are multiple competing priorities that we're trying to achieve: safety, climate, economic improvement. We want to ensure that we've got community confidence in what we're doing through effective communication and leadership. We want to address equity considerations and make sure that we're delivering for the whole region. And there is a limit to what the industry can actually deliver if we want to try and transform the whole region rapidly and at scale. There are some physical and economic limitations to what's possible. So why did we do this? Well, the central government asked us to do it and they provided us with the funding to get it done. It was also an opportunity to help develop and progress some of the ideas that Auckland has as a region in terms of how we'd like to achieve our climate commitments. And as with the previous item in the deliberative forum, it was an opportunity to get some additional learnings and do some additional modelling around what things might look like in terms of changing Auckland's transport system. So, what's in the program? The really quick and easy way to see it is this little diagram: 10-minute bus frequencies. That's not all the buses all the time. Key routes across the region running at turn up and go frequencies for most of the day, every day of the week. 75%, 3 out of 4 Aucklanders living sort of close by to a connected cycle network with safe separated facilities. And that comes at a cost of about $20.5 billion of capital expenditure. And that achieves our 29% reduction in light vehicle kilometres with an associated reduction in deaths and serious injuries when people move out of driving a car, which is something they can have a crash doing, and instead sit on a bus or a train. They're essentially much safer. The program identified 2 key enablers to allowing this to happen. The first one is that we really need to get out there with our communities and engage with them and communicate with them to make sure that they're on board with the process as it goes. If the community's not on board, we're going to face some speed bumps along the way, and we all know how we feel about those. And we need enabling legislation, which we're all reasonably familiar with in terms of time of use charging, etc. But we also need to be able to set the fees for penalties and enforcements and other things such as value capture mechanisms on property. Alongside the key enablers, which must happen first and early for the program to progress, We looked at rapid adaptation of existing assets. How can we change the assets that Auckland already has to get better value out of them, to get better productivity out of them, and to, at the same time, reduce the carbon emissions associated with them? And as per most transport projects, this came out and said we should make active modes, walking and cycling, much more attractive. We should make public transport much more attractive. We should make the city denser in the inner areas where it is easier to get access to things. And at the end of it all, we need to motivate people to travel differently. In order to achieve the scale of change we're looking for, you would need a pricing component. So quickly on the key enablers. What needs to happen first? Well, we just had a little summary of what Aucklanders told us. They want us to fix the transport system. They want us to do something about climate change, and they really want to see a cohesive plan that says we're actually going to do something about all this stuff that they can trust us to deliver on. There's really strong support for public transport. We didn't just do a deliberative forum, we had a Māori engagement process, a youth engagement process, we had voice of the customer processes that surveyed over 1,000 people and businesses and small enterprises from Auckland Transport, and collectively all of them said public transport, let's get on with it, let's deliver it. But they also strongly supported delivery of the cycle network and improvement of walking, as you saw, including removal of on-street parking to get that cycle network delivered. And there was modest support for time of use charging, parking charges, etc. That support grew when people better understood why it was important to achieving the outcomes we wanted to achieve. The communities all universally said they wanted better communications and engagement. Please talk to us more about what's going on so we have a better understanding of it. We can help by communicating what our vision for Auckland is as we're developing that. If we can get it across to Aucklanders, this is where we're heading and this is what we want and this is why it is good for you, they are much more likely to support it, they're much more likely to buy in. We need to be able to do a whole bundle of things in terms of our policy, our planning, and some regulation changes. There's a whole lot of work on this. Essentially, we need to be able to set the price of things. We need to be able to enforce things. We need to be able to capture the value of things when they increase in value. We also need to simplify some of our own internal processes, and we need a bit of a review of things like contributions, developer levies, etc. Strategic shifts. This was about how we could potentially rapidly adopt our existing assets in order to get the outcomes that we want, reshape our urban form, and ultimately the behaviour change associated. The map on the left shows our existing, or the baseline RTN that we use to analyse this program. This is approximately what would be delivered if we completed the 2021 RLTP. The image on the right is the proposed rapid transit network that we modelled under this program. The light-coloured lines in particular, I think, are interested. We're proposing a BRT light, bus rapid transit light system, where we have painted bus lanes going across the isthmus where we run express services. Mostly it's buses doing the heavy lifting. They're fast, they're quick to deliver. We can run them on our existing streets by reallocating street space, but we've also done as much as we see as practicable in terms of electric ferries and additional train services. On the left, we have a map we've more or less already seen today, which is our existing cycle network. It's quite disjointed, and as discussed, some of the facilities are not really appropriate or perhaps not attractive for people to cycle on. On the right, we have we analysed streets to see which ones had enough space to reallocate part of that street to put in basically the minimum viable product cycle lane. What's the limit, the least amount of space that you can use on a street to put in a cycle lane that has a little bit of physical separation from traffic? Mostly that fits on streets that already exist. In some instances we costed it where there may be a little bit of curb widening, or there may be a section of shared path that we widen the footpaths. The image on the right shows the potential complete cycle network that this program modelled, and you will notice that the rotary pathway is no longer classed as a cycleway. Every cycleway on that map is, in fact, meets a minimum standard of separation and path width. Finally, quality compact mixed use development for the city. Urban form is absolutely essential. The further the city grows outwards, the more people are likely to drive, and that's likely to push emissions up. It also sucks up a lot of our transport budget. On the left is a map that shows effectively quintiles that have access by public transport. The darker the colour, the more attractive it is from a climate and transport perspective to put new dwellings in that location. This program was developed in parallel with the future development strategy and is complementary to the future development strategy. The map on the right is where we arrived towards the end of the program as a recommendation for the best locations to put future development. Finally, We do propose implementing, as far as practicable, improvements to the public transport and active transport systems, but pricing will be necessary in order to achieve the level of emissions reduction proposed. For the sake of the model in this program, hypothetically, we proposed 3 toll points on the motorway network, tolling inbound only towards the city centre. We proposed a city centre cordon charge, and we also came to the conclusion that an approximately 10 cent per kilometre general cost of driving increase would be necessary in order to achieve the necessary level of emissions reduction described in the government's emissions reduction plan. That translates to roughly $1 per litre increase in the price of fuel. And so that would be something that would be required if we were to hit our emissions reduction targets through these mechanisms. Finally, there's essentially what would it all cost to do everything that I've just described to you. There's a P50, so it's about 50% likely that it would cost less or 50% likely that it would cost more than the number that we arrived on. For the capital expenditure is about $20.5 billion. It's a lot of money, but it's a figure that we can hold in our minds whenever there's discussion of a large-scale project or a mega project for the Auckland region. How does this compare to a similar project, a similarly priced project that could transform the entire regional transport system? At the same time, we're adding lots of buses, ferries, additional train units to the fleet. There's additional operational expenditure that comes through as part of this. Between 2025 and 2035, the 10 years of the project, it's estimated that the additional operational expenses come to approximately $5 billion or a little under. So, in summary, if this program was advanced as it was or as the program is modelled and designed, this would give Auckland a world-leading public transport system. We're talking about buses right across the region all day, every day. Almost everybody lives fairly close to a bus stop where a bus will reliably turn up. Significant reductions in traffic congestion. The model shows that while there would still be congestion on many of the arterial roads where we've reallocated spaces for bus routes, the buses themselves, of course, are not congested, and all of the journeys on those buses are not congested. And similarly, the motorway network in particular is now experiencing 29% less traffic, and therefore is significantly less congested. Aucklanders would have a choice of low carbon modes. This is really important when we're discussing things like using the emissions trading scheme or other types of pricing, that there is actually a substitute available for people so that they can ditch their car and choose to use something else. That option needs to be provided for them and it needs to be available. And so implementing a program such as this would provide that choice. And of course you see performance issues across the network by freeing up that motorway capacity, and otherwise you see that despite freight not being a part of this program, the freight network performance improves. Finally, effectively in summary of what the value is of presenting this at this time, the VKT reduction program has wrapped up at this point in time. We're bringing it back to this committee after initially presenting it in March last year. And it's worth considering both as a comparator for what else might happen in Auckland and what might be possible, and it's also worth using some of the modelling work and the insights that we've gained through this work to inform other program development as we go forward. Kia ora, happy to take questions, Chair, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and thank you for that very succinct presentation, given the amount of content that is in this document, and I think you spelled out very clearly any number of elements that have been getting bandied around here for quite some number of years. I would just say to councillors that there is some quite revealing information in here. The one that certainly jumped out to me was the graphs on the annual public transport trips per capita, which shows us marginally above really what our lowest rate ever was back in the mid-90s. So that graph compared to the 1940s and 50s is really quite stark, as does our current position in the world with public transport journeys per capita on page 30, which shows us just above Tehran and Los Angeles, but way, way behind what Auckland was back in 1945. So obviously we're in a different era, but these consistent themes that have come through today are well established and certainly point the way forward. So I I don't know if there's many questions here because this has been spelled out very clearly by Tim today and in some detail here, but I'll quickly open up the floor. Councillor Dalton, you wanted to answer?
Oh, it was sort of, it might be even a rhetorical, I don't know if it's rhetorical or not, but of all the presentations we've had today and the policies that we have that are mentioned in this document as well, there still seems to be this noisy pushback on all the things that we need to do to achieve our end game. Good public transport, excellent public transport system, reducing emissions, hitting those targets that are set by us, by central government, as well as our own targets. Where do we find the people that actually want this stuff? We know they're there, and we just heard that in the item before, that the results that came out of that deliberative democracy forum, all of the points that were supported in the end exactly comply or align with our transport policies, our urban design policies, our future development strategy, our unitary plan. Yet there still seems to be this real pushback to getting anything across the line that's transformational. I don't know if you can answer that.
No, we'll probably take that as a comment, I think. I don't think Hamish...
Can you answer?
Sorry, could you summarise the question? What's the what is the question that you...
That's okay. No, it's a hard question. It's a hard question. Thank you.
Member Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some great recommendations, equity outcomes, community health and wellbeing, and really good to see that you applied several strategies to engage with the Māori. I just want to flip it on the head a little bit, benefits, positives, good outcomes. Flipping it, like what further considerations been given to address any concerns raised by Māori?
Kia ora, thank you for the question. In short, this is the first place we've brought this program since completion, and we are seeking endorsement from this committee to use the program further. I think there are a number of recommendations that were made. There is a specific appendix on the Māori engagement that's in there, and there are a few recommendations included in there. So I think should this committee endorse using the work further, then that opens the door to investigating that work, both from Auckland Transport, Auckland Council and our partners. Thanks.
Cool, and I guess the follow-up would be like how will the findings of your engagement be shared across the council group so they can be addressed across the organisation?
Kia ora. A similar answer to the first part actually, which is should it be endorsed for further work, then that creates the opportunity for officers to use the findings of this and essentially ask the question amongst their teams, how can we use this to do our job better, which is something that officers are typically seeking to do.
Yeah, kapai. Thank you.
Councillor Williamson?
Yeah, look, my apologies, but at one point you sort of woke me from my dazed stupor and went shared cycle path, cycleway. You had something on a slide. What did you actually say? I want to make sure I got it absolutely correct.
About the Rotary Walk.
Rotary Walk is the focus of attention there.
No, just what did you actually say about that when you had that slide up about cycle paths and shared?
We'd need to review the recording to get my verbatim comments. The cycle network that we planned as part of this work has meets a minimum standard for interim cycleways. Essentially, Auckland Transport has a design manual that sets what the minimum standard is for temporary or interim. So it doesn't meet the optimum design standards that we would like to strive for with our cycle network, but it does meet a minimum standard in terms of separation and width.
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay. I think that's it. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Ferry. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks, Hamish. And Tim.
Thank you, Chair.
There's a lot of compression there. And the final item for today. Okay, Councillor Walker, happy to move the summary of transport infrastructure information memoranda. Seconded by Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Do you wish your vote recorded against? Okay, just thank you, Councillor Williamson. And that ladies and gentlemen, completes the business for today. Thank you very much for your attendance and
Thank you,
for your
Chair.
participation. And see you all out on the pavements in your bikes going here. How many people came in a bike? 2? How many people came in on public transport? One,
How many
two,
people
three.
came in a self-drive electric vehicle?
How many heathens came in cars?
Within about 3 kilometres of where they live.
You've got a busway or a
That's
bike.
more than 3 kilometres, 4.5 kilometres to walk to the busway. You don't even have to pay for it. 4.5 K. Let me see, you walk 4.5 bloody K to work. Go on.